everybody, and welcome to tonight's episode of Talking Elite, episode 61, as we continue our dive and journey into WrestleMania history. We are coming up on WrestleMania 40. We're almost there, and we're actually almost through all our WrestleManias. I know this has been a strenuous and long journey we've been having on this show, but it's really fun. It's something different that I wanted to do, considering WrestleMania is probably one of the biggest events ever in pro wrestling, and a lot of things happen on WrestleMania weekend, not just in WWE, but also in other promotions as well. They have big events during the weekend for WrestleMania, so I figured, hey, why not do a couple of weeks of covering the history of WrestleMania over matches and history and all that. But before we get to tonight's episode, let me introduce everybody to our group tonight. Joining me, as always, he's the man who knows his stuff about the golden age of wrestling, everything from the territories to, the 90s, the Attitude, the WCW, everything. And he's a great joy to talk to. Jason's joining us tonight. Jason, how's it going?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Hey, you can't complain. It's another Thursday night, and here we are talking wrestling.
Absolutely. Always happy to be here.
And also joining us tonight, she is one of our favorite Midwesterners. She is the cue card girl herself, Wardlow's biggest fan, Danny, of course, with her cue cards. So let's read them all together. Quiet Diva with a tooth issue.
Quiet Diva with the tooth issue.
We'll let you read.
Okay, so Quiet Diva, I have to get a root canal, people, in a month. Yay. I'd rather have braces, be tortured in 11th grade with braces. Are we going to SummerSlam, people? Are we going to All Out? Help me decide. I don't know where to go. Or where to go and what to do. SummerSlam. Oh. Or where to go and what to do.
Yep, that's my phone.
Okay. Welcome, Mercedes.
Yep.
Happy to see you. And I'm trying to figure out the difference between the Young Bucks and Cotton. And I figured out that only one is useful and both are soft.
Oh, very nice. We learn something every day. But yes, thank you guys for joining me tonight. Again, I know this is a lot, and before we went live, I know you guys asked if I had some plans after the WrestleMania. Yeah, I have a few show ideas after the WrestleMania history, including, a spotlight on an AEW wrestler and some other stuff I have in mind, whether it's gimmicks or something like that. I've got a lot of good ideas. I've just got to spread them out because my plate is always full. But tonight we continue. We have moved into almost the period of continuing PG wrestling in WWE, but we get more of a feel of still good matches and a lot of gimmick matches at WrestleMania. But very excited to continue it because now we're at the stage where, and we'll see over the next couple of WrestleManias of women's wrestling. I know that's something huge Danny likes to talk about all the, the divas into actual female wrestlers and superstars. So we'll be getting to a lot of those matches, especially on the later ones with, especially starting tonight with 30. Obviously, we are covering WrestleManias 26 through 30 tonight. So we're about, I would say, over halfway done with WrestleMania. So I know this is a lot, but we're very excited to talk about it. So before we get in, is there any recap from last week that we might have forgotten from WrestleManias 21 through 25?
No, I think we covered that pretty well, actually.
Yeah,
she was down for the count. But before we get started, though, I don't get to talk to you guys as much as I'd like to, and I always like hearing your opinion. Just to, not that we have to dive into it real deeply, but what did you feel coming off Big Business last night?
Good question, Danny. Go ahead.
I was surprised, but not surprised to see Mercedes Moné. She had a cute debut. I felt that probably because we all knew she was coming anyway, that they could have saved it for Dynasty. I felt like that would have made more fun. I think that, again, the Wardlow thing was just why my husband actually came out of the kitchen and he goes, Joe won. And he was shaking his head. And
it wasn't that he won, it was how he won.
Yeah. And this is like, I don't understand what Tony Khan's issue is with Wardlow. And I saw something in one of the groups today posted about Wardlow losing, and it was a question of, does Tony Khan not like Wardlow? That he's, in this faction and he's there and he's not really doing anything. I didn't watch all of it, but I started watching part of it today. And I know Bang Bang Scissor Gang, I'm not going to give away spoilers for those of you that didn't watch it, but I heard a little rumor about something that happened between those two, which I won't give away spoilers. But other than that, from what I saw, it wasn't too bad. I just felt like Mercedes opening the show, because we knew she was coming, wasn't that special, and the hair was a little overstimulating. The outfit was cute, the boots were cute, but the hair was a little too much.
Well, the only reason I ask is I know I'm hypercritical of certain things, and I try to look at everything. I enjoy everything. I enjoy watching it, and I know I kind of compare it to a lot of stuff that I grew up watching, and trying to bring it into today. I will say that I don't get a lot of time to go back and watch New Japan and different stuff like that. So I've only seen a few Will Ospreay matches, but every time he's come out, he presents himself and he comes across as a star. I am looking forward to watching Will Ospreay, and seeing what he can, where he can go. Okada, I'm kind of up in the air about where he's got. I'm not sure if pairing him with the Young Bucks was the best way to bring him in. I'm seeing how the American audience will take to Okada. Tony Khan, in my opinion, has a bad habit of signing all these shiny new toys. He'll book the dream match, and then they just start collecting dust for a couple of months, and you don't see them, and then they come back. Mercedes Moné, Sasha Banks, for those who don't know, she's a star, but will she remain a star? They brought her out, they let her do her thing. I thought maybe with the big business title that maybe he was going to announce a new TV contract, new TV deal. Something more exciting than just Mercedes Moné. We had the Boston with the way she likes to, spell her boss, but then they bring her out to help Willow Nightingale. And it's nothing against Willow, but to me, Willow's kind of the Orange Cassidy of the women's division. And there's not any star power. I mean, Britt Baker's been hurt for, I don't know how long she's been off
at
TV.
least 6 months, I think.
And, Toni Storm has definitely, upped her game since she's been in AEW and started the gimmick, but there's no star power, in my opinion, to keep Mercedes Moné at that level in AEW. So I'm interested to see what he can do with it and where they can go.
Well, my take on this is from last night on Big Business. I because it was in Boston, the way the logo looked and the way Boston was spelled, we all knew she was debuting. I mean, it is her hometown. I was 50-50 on the booking of her promo last night. Actually, because, even though she was more heartwarming, I said to myself, now would be a great time for someone to come out, kind of spoil that. But then how often do we see that? How often we see it a lot when someone big shows up or returns or debuts, there's always someone that comes out and just like interrupts them and has to say something. But for me, I was okay with nobody, even though I would have loved to see Britt Baker at some point last night just get face to face with Mercedes. It was still a nice little promo that Mercedes gave. And here's the nice thing about the promos in AEW. Some of them are pre-screened. They have to be pre-approved, but kind of sense that most of what she said last night was from the heart. Just because she feels like this is where I want to be, because this is where I feel I'll get a lot of opportunities. Even though she got a lot of opportunities in WWE, she kind of falter a lot of opportunities in WWE, and the Sasha Banks got over a little bit over in WWE, obviously. But when she left, and we've seen this with other wrestlers who go, solo from WWE and kind of change their career. Matt Cardona is a perfect one. He's the darling of the indies, we're seeing it right now with Nick Nemeth over in TNA and New Japan. Right now we're seeing it with Mercedes Moné. So her promo, honoring Eddie and saying if it wasn't for Eddie Guerrero, I wouldn't be here. He gave me inspiration. So you felt like it was from the heart. And I did like the take on saving Willow, because there's a story there from the New Japan Strongweight Women's title that Willow beat Mercedes for on a call, kind of like on fly call because of Mercedes' ankle. So there is history there, but I did like that they still played the whole face for Mercedes in Boston. So I'm very interested to see where it goes. Obviously, her and Willow has some stuff to settle, but it seems after last night, they're not fully pushing her to the women's title, but the TBS title picture, which I'm okay with. Obviously, there's still more of a story for the women's title on AEW with Toni Storm, Deanna, and Mariah May being involved. And, because that promo last night from Deanna, even though it was short, it was great. Telling her, I'm going to put that shoe up your ass. And I'm actually okay with Rio and Willow headlining, main eventing Dynamite. It was something different. It gave Boston both Mercedes in the beginning and Mercedes at the end. I think that was the goal.
Well, I'll say one of the things that came off last night, and of course they didn't show it on TV, but was the pictures of Naomi and Bayley in the skybox. So,
yes.
Whether you like WWE or not, it's a brand new WWE, because under Vince McMahon, that would not have happened.
No.
And this is my problem with a lot of the toxic wrestling community is people show those pictures and they're like, oh, well, guess she's not winning at WrestleMania. How do you know? Like, you don't know their lives. I mean, people have been doing this for a long time, have been going over to their friends' companies to watch them wrestle either big matches or see them debut, like to see them do big things. Like, we could think back of, not too long ago, Ricky Starks walking with Cody at WrestleMania. Like, and now Bayley's over in AEW. I don't think they care. I think the big thing is, as long as you're not shown on camera, they don't care.
Yeah, that's I actually was Lex Luger did him and DDP did, I want to say it was Busted Open, I could be wrong, after Sting's last match, and they are both under Legends deals with the WWE. And when they were asked about if WWE had a problem with them going, that was their exact response. They were like, no, just don't do an interview backstage, don't do anything on camera. If they show you, so be it. In the audience, we don't care about that, but don't get on camera doing interviews and doing talking and stuff like that. We're fine, go have fun.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that was my take on Big Business, and I'm excited to see where they're going. And we could talk. I'm pretty sure we'll do a review on Big Business next week. I know we do a lot of review stuff on Tuesday with Canada, and I'm sure we'll cover Big Business on that. And obviously, if you guys want to, on our channel, all our viewers and listeners, if you guys want to go to our YouTube, we have live reactions, so you could catch the live reaction from the Big Business last night. Really good show last night of both the reaction and Dynamite. Very excited to see where they're going with a lot of things. And Will Ospreay's the man. I mean, I just
hadn't seen enough. I'd heard great things about him. I just hadn't seen enough of him.
I loved his promo last night. Loved it. It gave me chills the entire time. I'm like, dude, this guy is just going to go shoot to the moon in AEW.
I'm starting to dig him. I didn't know who he was until he came over. And one thing, Jason, that I wanted to bring up that you were talking about Okada, if anybody is familiar with Mr. Tito on NoDQ.com, Aaron Riff's site, Tito wrote an interesting article that he talked about where he felt like the Bucks buried Okada on his first night because he signed with them. And I'm not sure how to take that, because again, if you don't watch, I have to stop and think, NP, New Japan, whatever it is, I can't think of the letters right now, but if you don't watch New Japan, which I don't get it here in Wisconsin, so I don't know Takeshita, whose music is creepy. I don't know who Okada is. But the question of putting Okada with the Bucks, is that the right way to introduce him? And that's what Tito was trying to get at. I don't think it was more so to put the Bucks down, but I also know that he's not, a big Bucks fan, but he does want AEW to succeed. But yet, was this the right call of Tony Khan? Like, here, let's introduce you to our American audience, go side with the EVPs, or would he have been better off perhaps aligning with Takeshita and Don Callis?
Will Ospreay is getting ready to take off from the Don Callis family. We all see that coming, but like I said, the jury's still out for me on how that's going to go, because nobody really knows where Kenny's at as far as his health goes. So I mean, with the firing of Kenny from the Elite, suspending Paige and whoever else you want to throw in there for a 6-man, then that could be definitely interesting TV. But again, nobody really has said a whole lot about where Kenny Omega is on coming back. So like I said, just depending on his health and who else they might want to get involved in it, it could be an interesting storyline.
Yeah. And one thing, I was watching that match with that match with the Bucks and Okada. It was Pac, Eddie Kingston, and I can't remember who else was in it. And if you notice, the Bucks take long breaks during their matches. And I was sitting here like, oh, and again, I took my nephew 2021 to Dynamite, and he goes, Auntie, he goes, I know why you don't like them. And he's like, look, they don't really wrestle. They don't do anything. And look how long they've been out of the ring. And I was like, oh, in a 10-15 minute match, they spend at least 3/4 of it laying on, outside the ring.
Well, another thing I'll say too, and is, it is very obvious that the Young Bucks do not have the popularity that they had 4 years ago, 5 years ago when AEW started. So that's another reason I question the booking of it. But like I said, we'll have to wait and see where Kenny's at and where they go.
Yeah, no, I think right now, just with all the signings, because I saw a post today of all the signings that AEW has so far made in 2024, and it gets me excited. Not even just the big names, but smaller names. Brian Keith, signing him, Queen Aminata, she impressed me a little bit in the ring. So you're seeing all these other wrestlers getting signed that, that are all elite. Deonna Purrazza's another big one, Mercedes, Okada, now Ospreay. So, I mean, the sky's the limit for AEW. They just now got to take that path. As we move forward for tonight for our topic, so again, tonight we cover 26 through 30 tonight. And we first start off with WrestleMania 26. This card was very entertaining. You saw a lot of good feuds kind of lead into this pay-per-view, but also a lot of stories coming out of it. So to go through the card real quick, this actually was in 2010. It emanated from Glendale, Arizona. But show started off. I'm going to skip pre-show stuff for me, because that just really isn't big cards. So the very first match on the card was Show Miz, or The Miz and Big Show, defending their unified tag team titles against John Morrison and R-Truth. Then you had the triple threat match between the former Legacy members, Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, and Ted DiBiase. This was a triple threat match. And then you had the ladder match, Money in the Bank ladder match, with Jack Swagger, Christian, Dolph Ziggler, Drew McIntyre, Evan Bourne, Kane, Kofi Kingston, Matt Hardy, MVP, and Shelton Benjamin. That's a lot of names in that match. Then you had a grudge match between Triple H and Sheamus. Then you had Rey Mysterio wrestle CM Punk, whereas had Mysterio lost, he would have had to join that Straight Edge Society that included Luke Gallows and Serena Deeb at the time. So then you had, of course, we talked about these WrestleMania matches Mr. McMahon has with some of his old wrestlers. So we had the no holds barred lumberjack match between Bret Hart and Mr. McMahon. Then you had the World Heavyweight title match between Chris Jericho and Edge, former partners and friends, now turned enemies. Then you had a 10 Diva tag match that was very short. Then you had John Cena wrestle Batista for the WWE Championship, which Batista had won from John Cena after John Cena survived, I believe it was the Elimination Chamber. And then the main event was the rematch from WrestleMania 25 that we all agreed on last week was one of the better matches in WrestleMania history. It's a rematch between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, The Streak versus Career. So, Jason, I will start with you. Looking up and down this card, what are some of your takes, negative and positive?
That they learned from their mistake the previous year and put them on last.
Yeah.
which, probably I'm sure came from not only The Office, but everybody else out there. Some of this stuff, like I was telling you, the early stuff, for some odd reason, I can remember just about everything that's out there. And then some of these later ones, I remember a match or two. And then I have to scroll down and look. Real quick, God love R-Truth. I mean, I wish they would do more with him, because if you go back and watch any old TNA as Ron the Truth Killings, the man can go. He's a great promo. And yes, he's also entertaining. John Morrison and R-Truth, I barely remember them as a tag team. Randy Orton defeating Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase, I remember watching that match going, yep, they're not ready to push either one of them guys yet, because if they were, they would have let them win, even if it wasn't pinning Randy, but by pinning the other one and winning the match with Randy Orton in it. Jack Swagger had great music. Before they went to the We the People stuff with Dutch Mantel, but Triple H and Sheamus, they beat the hell out of each other. That was, I do remember that match. I had forgotten about not forgotten, but I hadn't talked about the Straight Edge Society in a while, and I remember the storyline with that match. The Bret Hart and Vince McMahon, the whole Hart family got involved, because you go back and watch the match. It's good to see Bret getting a payday, but it's also sad to see Bret moving as slow as he was in that match. It was hard to watch. Excuse me. Chris Jericho defeating Edge. Again, especially with that time frame with those two guys, you're not going to have a bad match. 10 Divas tag team match. What did it last? 2 minutes?
It's 3:26, almost 3.5 minutes,
roughly. Here we're still pushing John Cena, to win the title from back from Batista after he'd dropped it. And then again, to me, this is probably the as far as stuff goes, storyline wise, part of the 4 WrestleManias that continue to story over that time. It's I like that. I forgot which one we were talking about last week, but the build up for this one, and then the next two is with Triple H as well, which we'll get into when we go there, is what I really enjoyed. Because if you go back, Undertaker was champion. I want to say he had the World Heavyweight title, if I remember correctly.
He did.
And Michaels come out there accepting the Slammy Award for the match of the year. And I guess that's what it was, some award for match of the year on TV. And, he said then with his DX shirt on that he knew he could beat Undertaker. Because in the previous year, it was, you've never beat me. This is why your streak's going to end. This year, it's like, you got me last year, but I know I can beat you. And Taker said, no. What do I have left to prove to you? And then I believe it was the Elimination Chamber that Michaels come up from under the ring and cost him the World Heavyweight title. And they went back and forth with the banner for a few weeks. And then he finally agreed and said, fine, you got your match. And Michaels turned around to walk out, and under one condition. And, and Shawn Michaels turned back around and he goes, I'll give you the rematch, but if you lose, your career is over. And Michael's defining moment, he said, defining comment on that thing was, if I can't beat you, I don't have a career. And what I liked about this match, I thought the one from 25 was better, but I liked the ending to this one better. It went back and forth again, like the last one did, with them kicking out a finish after finish and going back and forth. And, Taker's facial expressions were, he wasn't known for those facial expressions. And, this series of matches, you got them. And, when he's telling Shawn at the end to stay down, and Shawn looks up at him and gives him does his gimmick to him. And then he gets up and slaps him. And you see the look in Taker's eye change. And then he picks him up. And I don't think I've ever seen him do this since. He actually jumped off the canvas, tombstone, and got the 1, 2, 3, and then helped Michaels back up and patted him on the back. And he left and let Shawn say his goodbyes. But, storytelling at its finest.
Yeah, I think I remember that he jumped the jumping tombstone. I don't know if he used to do that a lot in the 90s, but I know one of the games in the earlier days of WWE when they were doing video games, that they had that almost like that 2-bit game where they actually had Undertaker do the jumping tombstone as a finisher. So I don't know if it was called for you remember that game where you did the jumping tomb, do that to Shawn Michaels in the match at the end, but Yeah, no, this storytelling for The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, the second time around was so good. First time it was always that good versus evil. Now this one was just career versus streak. And the build up to it was phenomenal. Danny, what's your takeaway from that match and the rest of the card?
So rest of the card, you open with Fantasia singing America the Beautiful, which was good, but cringy because of her octave range. And she is more of a gospel-y singer. And as I'm sitting here again, watching the WrestleMania Time Machine with Jason driving this time, when were Miz and Show a tag team? You had Truth and Jomo, John Morrison versus Miz and Show, which is a complete cluster because out of the four of them, the only one that really stood out was Jomo. Miz, Truth, yes, and then Show was just there, I think, to be there. And then you had what else did you had? You had the Legacy breakup, which was DiBiase Jr. Versus Cody and Orton. And I marveled at how scrawny Cody was back, in 2013, or whenever this was, 2010, he had nothing to him. Interesting match because all three of them grew up in the business. They all had dads that were wrestlers, and each one has a different style. So that's what made it interesting. And if DiBiase had stayed in, not retired, and I don't remember what year he retired, but if DiBiase Jr. didn't retire, would he have gone any further? I think he may have. So there's that question. The Money in the Bank match, that was an interesting but odd mix. What was odd was Kane in that matchup to begin with, for just something about Kane in there. And then I forgot about Drew being in there, and I'm just like, oh, it's Drew McIntyre. Great. Ladders used as a balance beam was priceless. Bourne was impressive. And the question I have with this one is, why was Shelton Benjamin not hardcore pushed? Because that guy could go. I liked him. And then the other question I had for this one is, why did Drew look like a poster boy for a boy band?
This was during his time when they were doing the 3-man band.
Yeah.
It was him, Jinder Mahal, and
Heath Slater.
Heath Slater. Thank you. So that's why.
Yeah. So then Swagger wins without his hat. Trips and Sheamus. Sheamus has always been kind of to me. Never cared for him. Never saw the appeal. Triple H made the match. You had Punk. Oh, I can't even read my own scroll here. Punk with Serena Deebs and Luke Gallows versus Ray. This was some really good work with Punk. Anytime Punk is a heel, Punk is amazing. Ray, of course, was a 5 foot, 5-inch giant, and I'm 5'4". But Ray was like a tiny giant. Hitman versus Vince. This was a complete surprise match, I think, because no one saw this coming, but it was for Owen and the family. Then you had Edge versus Y2J, which was, that was a good one. But sadly, Edge retired the following year. Women's tag match, Batista, Cena, that was kind of met again because that was the boring of the Super Cena show when Cena was literally shoved down our throats.
Yeah, no, you know what? I like your takes on all these matches. I agree with a few points, especially the CM Punk heel.
Yeah.
CM Punk heel is good for business.
That man should never be a babyface.
No, I mean, that's
you got some guy, or you have some people that are good at playing faces. You've got some guys that are good at playing heels. He's the guy that always needs to be the heel because I think it's true to his personality.
Well, right. Not only that, but I mean, for somebody of his stature, he's bigger than Ray, but most people are. But for somebody of his size,
my nephew is.
He just comes off as a smug prick.
He really does.
And so the guy that everybody loves to boo, and except in Chicago, which is it's fine, but
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, like I said, I think Punk works better as a heel, and like you said, Jason, the only place he should get cheered is Chicago because that's his hometown. But yeah, I agree with you. the Trips Sheamus thing was almost like this was like pre Sheamus getting pushed to the WWE Championship. This was basically Trips because Sheamus is a Triple H guy.
Yeah, they were
Sheamus. I mean, they worked out great in that match. It was a good match, good push, and the feud continued even after this WrestleMania because the night after the Raw after this, Shawn was doing his goodbye and Trips hugged him, and out of nowhere during the night, Sheamus attacked Triple H. So this continued even after WrestleMania. That's why I enjoyed it. And it also pushed Sheamus more towards John Cena for the WWE title. The Bret Hart McMahon match, I can give or take. I've seen it a bunch of times. McMahon, Hogan, McMahon, Michaels. Like I've seen it so many times, and this was just kind of a redeeming for Bret Hart. That's basically what it was payday redeemer for him. The Chris Jericho Edge was probably one of my favorite matches on this card, surprisingly, outside of Taker and Michaels. It was probably my second favorite, just because of the story, because they formed a tag team, but this was some of Chris Jericho's best work. Heel Jericho in a suit, just walking around with the world title, him taking advantage of Michaels' super kick to Undertaker at Elimination Chamber to win the world title. And this was after Chris had, when he, Royal Rumble was eliminated by Edge because Edge had won the Royal Rumble and he was ready to challenge for the world title. And it surprised me that Edge lost. You didn't think that. You thought Edge would win, but I thought it was great that they put Chris Jericho continuing champion until Swagger cashed in. But I think
how that turned out.
Yeah. And I thought this was the second best match on the card. The one match I will say I was disappointing in, and I think it's where you started seeing the crowd start getting pushing for women's wrestling, and it was this Divas match because it only got 3.5 minutes. And you look at some of the names in this match, there's a few that stand out to me. Beth Phoenix, Gail Kim, and Mickie James, even Michelle McCool. These were some of the women that can actually go at it in the ring. They were really good in the ring. And they were thrown in this match that only lasted almost 3.5 minutes. So I think you started seeing it here where the crowd was like, dude, it's pointless. You're making this match short. Like, why should we care? Like, why don't you give them more time? I think this is where you start seeing a little bit of a push for women to have longer matches. But at this time, we're in the diva stage right now with WWE. I think it was between 2010, maybe 13, 14 is where you see the diva push. Where it's like, it's just divas. I think it wasn't until like a little after 2014, 2015 is where you start seeing women's wrestling and women's revolution in wrestling. But this is where for my opinion, this women's divas match was kind of the push, like the spark that kind of pushed it. Would you guys not agree?
I'd have to go back and look and see everybody that was in the match to be honest with you, because when I remember the women's revolution really starting to take a hold was when certain girls started getting called up from NXT with your Charlotte Flair, Sasha, Bayley, then Charlotte winning the Divas title, and then they turned it the very next night, I believe, into the Raw Women's title or whatever they turned it into. But now this was getting pretty close to the end of that. To the end of the Divas era, and my screen doesn't have all the people that were in it, but I'm going to look at it now and see. I've already told you, I know it's probably personal, but I always thought Mickie James, take the fact that I know her out of the equation. I thought she was very underrated. Kelly, Eve, Gail Kim, phenomenal. Beth Phoenix, phenomenal. Michelle McCool, Maurice, I thought, was underrated. I always liked Maurice. Layla, she was okay. Alicia Fox, and then Alicia Fox was there for a long time, so somebody liked her. Then of course Vicky Guerrero, who, like I said, despite what you might think about the WWE, what they did for her after Eddie's passing was, to me, it was very amazing.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, like this is still kind of the Divas era to me, but they were pushing close to get out of it. There were some girls that could work in this match, but the majority, to me, were still divas.
Yeah, and I think too, when you look at look at the days of like Leilani Kai, Rockin' Rob, and Jumping Bomb Angels. And we're talking, this is like from the early to mid 80s. And occasionally when you're watching primetime, they would feature, a women's match on there. And here you've got women with like mom bodies, that weren't fit. They weren't toned. They weren't like this perfect little box Barbie type, in a box, so to speak. And then when you think of who I consider to be one of the original divas, Miss Elizabeth, just, walking out in a dress with Mach. She didn't say much. She didn't talk much. She was there. But then you've got Sensational Sherry, who physically did get involved in matches. And we're talking, again, 80s AWA. She physically got involved in a lot of those matches.
Well, Sherry could go.
Yeah. And then when you've got like, this diva group, and you've got like Christy Hemme, and you've got, who did you have? You had Christy Hemme, you had who Candice Michelle, I think, was in that group. You had Kelly specifically. Like, they were divas. They were pretty girls who pretended to wrestle. But then when you had Charlotte Flair, who again looks completely different now than she did when she appeared at the Hall of Fame ceremony. You've got Charlotte, you've got Becky, you've got Bayley, who the original 4 horsewomen. That's when the trajectory of women's wrestling changed, because they were pretty girls, but they were athletic and they were trained to wrestle, versus just standing there with like the princess wave and not saying a word. And that changed trajectory for women's wrestling.
Well, I'll tell you this too. I've been paying attention to a lot more than I used to, as far as, some of the women going back and talking about stuff in this era, especially with the stuff, coming out about Vince McMahon. And I believe it was Tori Wilson that came out and said that a lot of that stuff that they had to go out and do, that she was not the only one in tears before and after, that they had to go out and do that stuff. One of the reasons that I enjoy talking to you guys, it does bring back memories. Like this Triple H and Sheamus that you were discussing. One of the things I remember about that match, it had been very well documented when it started that, Sheamus was Triple H's guy. He worked out with him. They were workout buddies. Mm-hmm. A lot of people did not think he was deserving of this spot yet, but Triple H pushed for him to get it. And Chris Jericho's another one I'll put in the same vicinity as CM Punk, especially now. If you guys, I don't know, if you never watched WCW, but Jericho is still to this day. I mean, he's not what he used to be, of course, but he's such a great heel, a smug little asshole.
Oh, he is.
I mean, that stuff he did with Goldberg, coming out saying Greenberg 0, Jericho 2. I mean, he's another one, in my opinion, that, mm-hmm. You can give him a 2-month babyface run if somebody turns on him or beats him up or whatever because he lost a match. But he's another one, in my opinion, that should never be a babyface again.
No,
I agree. But yeah, no, that WrestleMania 26 was a decent card. There were some matches, I guess was forgettable, but overall, I think pretty fun card. Some good matches. I think 3 or 4 of them I thoroughly enjoyed. So with that being said, we move on to WrestleMania 27, happening at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta, Georgia, as you can see from the logo behind me. This pay-per-view was weird to me, because it was hosted by The Rock. So you got that nostalgia of, hey, we're bringing back a former Attitude Wrestler to host this WrestleMania for you. So boom, buy tickets. But also you had some weird matches on this card. Mm-hmm. Matches that I think out of the few of them, there's only 3 or 4 of them that I actually enjoyed, but 3 of them that I thoroughly enjoyed. So going through the card, again, I'm not going to do the pre-show stuff, but card started off with Edge defending his World Heavyweight title against Alberto Del Rio, which, by the way, was his last match until 2020, until he returned at the Royal Rumble. So he would vacate the world title the next night on Raw, saying he has to retire, all that stuff. So this was his last match for 9 years. Then we move on to Cody Rhodes against Rey Mysterio, and I believe this is when Cody was using the Dashing Cody Rhodes moniker. Then you had an 8-man tag with Big Show, Kane, Kofi Kingston, and Santino Marella against the Core. If anyone remembers the Core, that was Ezekiel Jackson, Heath Slater, Justin Gabriel, Wade Barrett. This is when the Nexus and most members of the Core kind of split up into two groups. Then you had Randy Orton against CM Punk. That's one of the matches I thoroughly enjoyed on this card. Then you get this weird ass match between announcers. This was heel Michael Cole time. And he wrestled Jerry Lawler with Stone Cold Steve Austin as special guest referee. Then you had The Undertaker against Triple H in that no holds barred match, where actually they both got fined after because they both did that share shots to the head. And then you had a 6-person mixed tag match, which I'll discuss in a minute. You had John Morrison with Snooki and Trish Stratus taking on Dolph Ziggler and Le Cool. And then your main event was The Miz defending the WWE title against John Cena. So real quick for a lot of people, and then we'll get to our discussion about our thoughts on everyone's card on the card. But my takeaway from that match, that 6-person mixed tag, there was a lot of controversy because John Morrison had come back out later and said, I don't think Snooki needed to be in that match. It was more so of a celebrity that wanted to get into a wrestling ring and do some fun stuff to have a payday and get in front of cameras. He said there was a lot more women in the back that was more deserving of that spot. So for me, that match and the announcers match probably could have done without for this card. So with that said, I will start with you, Jason, your takeaway from this card.
Well, it's kind of funny that we're here. I'm not sure. Did you watch Raw Monday night?
Yes.
Well, Cody Rhodes actually brought up, Michael Cole being in his singlet and being behind the glass when he was doing the whole Michael Cole heel persona.
Yeah.
Because when they were talking about changing over the course of time. So, but that's really nothing special to talk about. No, and I remember what you're talking about with John Morrison, and he was 100% right. And I have no issue at all, especially at WrestleMania time or even SummerSlam, the Rumble, or the Survivor Series, getting a celebrity involved, such as a Bad Bunny or Logan Paul's now kind of went from that stage into the Roman Reigns stage of part-time champion. But if they want to put in the work and look good in there and be that name to draw people in, then I'm all for it, because that's what the WWE has been doing for years. But if she just wanted to get in there and not only is she putting herself at risk, she's putting others at risk. If she's not going to take it seriously. Cody Rhodes, those promos were those vignettes were just so cringe. But it did what it was supposed to do. I forgot that Brodus Clay was in this match with Alberto Del Rio and Edge. Now you can catch him on Fox News if you like. And looking over this, I'm sitting there racking my brain. I'm like, has CM Punk ever won a WrestleMania match? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, he has the 2 Money in the Bank matches.
That's right. Okay. Well, he hadn't put anybody's shoulders down in the mat yet at this point. The Miz, a lot of people don't like the Miz. I always have. With the story he came in with, coming off the reality show, the stuff he went through in the back, because the guys and the girls really did not like him. He was legit locked out of locker rooms and having to change in bathrooms. But he worked hard to gain their respect. And I mean, they've been trying to turn him face, which I don't agree with. I've always thought he was a great chicken shit heel and did exactly what he was supposed to do.
Oh yeah.
But I've always thought I've always enjoyed the Miz's work. He's funny. He's good on the mic. I enjoy Miz TV. It's not Piper's Pit, but it's by far probably my favorite talk show that they've done in the modern era. With some of the other stuff they tried to do, and then getting back to Taker and Triple H, again they laid it in on each other. And if you go back and you watch this WrestleMania at the end of the match, they do show, they don't comment on it, but they do show Triple H just rolling out of the ring and walking back up the ramp, and they show Taker being helped out. And they don't bring it back up till the following year, but they got that footage and you saw it.
Yeah. Danny, your take on this card.
So you opened with Carrie Hilson singing America the Beautiful, and she's got a set of vocals on her. Liked it. The Rock hosted it. I'd rather have 11 minutes of The Rock yapping then versus 22 minutes of The Rock yapping now. Maybe because we're also not in 2011 anymore. Del Rio versus Edge. Again, looking back on this, I cried when Edge had to retire the next night. I was in tears because I love Edge, and I cried when he returned. I never saw the appeal of Alberto Del Rio. I feel like he did okay, but he just, for some reason, there was just something about him that just did not, like, I don't know, didn't fit. I feel like if Eddie were still alive, Eddie would have embarrassed the hell out of him. Like, Eddie would have, like, basically put him in his place. Edge looked really pained during that match. And again, it's with the next, I mean, again, this was his last match, and the next day he had to retire. Brodus Clay, I liked him. I always thought he had an interesting look, and I did like his work. He was entertaining. Cody versus Ray. This was, I feel like, for me, for some people, it's kind of a cringy gimmick of Cody, but Cody's the guy, again, that you've taken the legacy gimmick. You took the dashing Cody Rhodes gimmick when he wore the face thing. You took the Stardust gimmick. Cody has taken every gimmick and worked it, honestly. And this was like no exception. It was a good match because Cody's, training, obviously being the son of the American Dream versus Ray Style, the core, I felt like needed a little bit more time. And out of the core, I always liked Wade Barrett, and I did like Ezekiel Jackson. They were interesting. Barrett and Zeke were the standouts, and I feel like they should have given them more time as a faction. Punk versus Orton. Punk was really good here. Orton can play face or heel, but again, Punk is better as a heel because it suits his personality. This match added to the rise of Punk because if you remember, what was that, July of that year, we got the pipe bomb. It was like June or July when he sat on the, he sat by the entryway and he had the pipe bomb with the Cult of Personality music. And then the Michael Cole versus Lawler, I completely forgot that this happened. The highlight of this one, I feel like, was when Stone Cold stunned everybody. Trips versus Taker. It was Trips' mania moment. The streak was kept alive. And then that Jomo, Trish, and Snooki, Lay Cool versus Dolph Ziggler. Again, Dolph Ziggler was very underrated. Dolph Ziggler should have been pushed eons ago. And again, I'm not sure the purpose of Snooki there because John Morrison's right. I mean, look at the people she's in the ring with. And if she was like, oh, I can do that. That looks cool. Hey, I can do that move too. Well, you can't because you're not a trained wrestler. So that's, and then, we're missing one more. Hold on. Okay. And then Miz versus Alex Riley with Cena. This is where, again, we're in the thick of the Super Cena show where Cena had some boos. If you go back and listen, he had some boos. He was getting boring. And one thing that I found, and I don't know if you guys knew this, but Alex Riley, I liked Alex Riley with The Miz. But Alex Riley, I don't think could have stood alone without The Miz. And Alex Riley said that he had stood up to Cena, I guess, in the back, and Cena's influence ruined his WWE career.
Yeah, that I've heard.
Yeah, I've heard.
I liked Riley with The Miz, but I much prefer Damian Sandow. That was great.
Damian Sandow, I liked him too. Yes, liked him.
And yeah, even though this was in the middle of Cena getting pushed, we did get a Miz victory, and he will tell you he won the main event at WrestleMania every chance he gets.
And The Miz, I feel like too, what you said too before, Jason, is I almost said mid. Miz is such a corporate guy. He basically does whatever he's asked to do. I don't think he complains much. And his being the cocky, arrogant face is, I feel like, a true representation of his personality. And their show Miz and Mrs. is hysterical. I loved it, and I hope they have another season this year. But again, he's just got that charm where he's fun, but he plays that just pompous jerk so well to a T that you wonder, is that what he is in real life?
Yeah, no, you know what? I enjoy, take away from that, I enjoy Miz and Riley. I think they were a great pairing. I think it was something that Riley was kind of a rookie in it, and Miz took him under his wing, kind of like what they did with the rookies in NXT with the pros and all that stuff. But it's amazing the trajectory that Alex Riley's career went after standing up to Cena in the back and him using his influence to kind of give Riley the downfall in his career in WWE, which surprisingly happened in 2016. You think about, from this time, 2011, 2016, 5 years in that span, Riley wasn't getting pushed much and all that stuff. Him and Miz had a little bit of a feud after Miz lost the title. And surprisingly, he didn't wrestle for a while. And a lot of people don't know this. Alex Riley took a hiatus from pro wrestling in 2016 after WWE let him go. He actually came back in 2022 for Creative Pro Wrestling. It was an event there. He teamed with Tyrus, obviously, for Brodus Clay. And then he came back as another name, the Rare Breed Kevin Kiley, for the NWA event Nuff Said, where he wrestled EC3. So he did come back to wrestling, but it did take him a while after that whole situation with WWE to kind of come back into it. And I think he was very, the look at the guy, I felt like he could have been pushed really well. Hadn't been for certain people in the back, and I think that's one lesson you learn. You learn as a new person in a new company. If there's someone there that's been there for a long time and has a lot of influence and you don't like it, go to someone else instead of confronting them, because it's just going to blow back on you.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of the position from back then, young guy, good look, of what they're doing with the Austin Theory and Grayson Waller.
Yes. So I did enjoy Alex Riley. I really wish that he had more opportunities. But overall, the card for this pay-per-view, again, very weird. Like I said, I could have done without the Michael Cole, Jerry Lawler, because people have to remember this was during the anonymous GM thing. They had no GM for Raw, so they had an anonymous GM. They had the computer, and every now and then you'd hear the doo-doo from the computer saying, "Oh, we've got a message from the GM on the computer." It was so dumb.
I know that turned out to be Hornswoggle, but it was.
I knew, it did. It turned out to be Hornswoggle.
It was supposed to be somebody else, and it fell through. And I don't remember who it was supposed to be.
Yes. So that fell through because Jerry Lawler originally won that match, and then they disqualified him. Michael Cole won. Michael Cole still holds it. It's like, I'm 1-0 at WrestleMania, Some of the matches I do remember was Edge, obviously, because it was his last one for 8 years or 9 years. And I was a big Edge head. So, obviously loved him. I remember the Randy Orton CM Punk, because CM Punk was running the Nexus, the new Nexus, basically, during that time. And yes, you're right, Danny. That was the summer of the pipe bomb Punk.
Yeah.
And actually, Cult of Personality did happen after Money in the Bank, because he was still coming out to his other theme that he came out with originally.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.
You talk about that. That's one of the things I remember Jim Cornette talking about when Punk first came back after he left and came back with the title, and he started coming out to Cult of Personality. He said, as soon as that music hit, I knew that man got everything he asked for. He goes, Vince McMahon hates to license music. He goes, that man got everything he asked for.
Yeah. So I do remember that match. Undertaker Triple H, obviously, I remember it was one of a classic matches. Almost back to their other WrestleMania match. I believe that was 2003. I know we discussed it. It was they had another match in a previous WrestleMania. So they've actually wrestled each other 3 times at a WrestleMania. But yeah, I remember the running spine buster through the table that Trips did to Undertaker, which was awesome. They destroyed Michael Cole's box during that match. And yes, I do remember the end where Triple H was able to walk, and he kind of looked back, seeing the Undertaker falling to the ground, can't walk on his own. And again, the championship match, that championship match was very odd because during it, Miz got a concussion. It was during the spot while he was sitting on the barricade, and Cena clotheslined him over to the outside with the crowd, and he hit his head on the cement. but also this was the build for the following year of Rock versus Cena. Because The Rock came back, hit the rock bottom on Cena and actually restarted the match because of a double countout. And Rock restarted it, hit the rock bottom on Cena. Miz won, but then he hit the people's elbow on the Miz. So basically, The Rock was the Stone Cold of the Brock Lesnar Goldberg match. He was that guy in this match. But yeah, no, this card overall, some memorable, some not so memorable. And again, you see there's only one match that has females wrestling in it, and it was the mixed tag match. They didn't have a single individual women's match. And again, it was the Super Cena time. Everybody thought, oh, Cena's going to win the title at WrestleMania, but Miz ends up winning. So overall, this card, not the greatest, but not the worst. Any other takeaways from WrestleMania 27?
I'll touch on what Danny said real quick, where she said she'd rather listen to 11 minutes of The Rock then than 22 now.
Yeah.
I kind of agree, but I will say this about what they're doing now. If The Rock comes back for one appearance, then of course, get him cheered, do what you got to do. But for what he's doing now, whether it was planned or whether it was just the whole organic, we want Cody, you never know what they're thinking behind, because, it's obvious they know more about this stuff than we do. And, you don't know what's going on in the back. But right now, for him to be on TV every week, Rocky's doing exactly what he needs to be doing. I love Seth Rollins, comment last week on SmackDown when he said, "I'm sorry you're having a midlife crisis, but your time has passed. This is our time."
That was I watched that segment like 4 times. It was so entertaining.
But like I said, The Rock, once they flipped it and said Cody was going to face Roman and the whole smack and everything, Rock's doing what he needs to do right now.
Right. Danny, your takeaway from that?
All I want to know is where can I get Seth Rollins' coat from that segment? But it was, and again, it's entertaining. It's, it's vintage Rock, but it's also just kind of weird to see him back in a WWE ring. And as I was doing this, I was, reading some of the comments and, various social media sites just about The Rock. And somebody wrote, I know, I had asked the question because again, we're Hulu streamers. So we basically have like the cable thing on Hulu, and then I could just, record SmackDown and then usually watch it the next day. And I was sitting here watching it, and I was at the part where Cody smacked The Rock, and I was like, wait, what happened? Well, then the camera's cut. So I'm thinking, did something else happen? And I actually posted in a group, did I miss something? This is where it cut off on my TV. And somebody said something about, you didn't miss anything, but The Rock doesn't know when to shut up. He just rambles on. So I took that as kind of funny. But again, I do kind of see Jason, where you're coming from, because you're right. He is doing what he's supposed to be doing, and featuring him on SmackDown is a great way to build that story with that payoff at WrestleMania.
Yeah. And like I said last week, I mean, normally I can't sit here and tell you everything is going to happen, but normally I've got a pretty good idea of where stuff's going. And between the dirty look Seth Rollins is giving Cody when Cody's talking and the building tension between Roman and The Rock, I have no idea what they're going to do on both nights. I have no idea where it's going, but you want Seth's coat, they make jokes out of it, but, Seth has come out in an interview and said that when he felt his character was becoming stale and he was trying to figure out how to amp up his character and do something new, it was Becky that said, well, here, and gave him, said, talk to her. She makes my clothes, maybe she can come up with something for you. So her designer started making stuff for Seth. That's where the whole joke of you're wearing your wife's clothes comes from. So, find her designer and you can get that coat.
Yeah, no, that's fashion sense. Yes. It's fantastic. Like you guys said, I think what The Rock's doing now, he's doing exactly what needs to be done to tell the story. And I think at this point, I mean, everything, they say that everything's already planned out, for a while. Like if it's 6 months to a year, like they've got stuff planned out. I mean, even after last year's WrestleMania, when Cody lost, and they were interviewing Triple H in the back during the press conference, and he says the story's not over. That's what he said. You know, he said the story's not over.
Did you watch the Peacock documentary Becoming Cody Rhodes?
Oh yeah.
Well, I forgot what part of it was, but when he started talking about, you know, Dusty and the chase, you know, when he was chasing Flair and chasing Harley Race, the money was in the chase, not in the win. And I said, "Oh, you sorry SOB, you wanted to lose to begin with." Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
That was you that made that call.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like you said, I think this is on the right path. This is where they want to go with the story. Obviously, everything's starting to accumulate at 40, obviously. Heck, we're going to get brother versus brother with the Usos. We're going to get night 1, you're going to get, you know, the tag match, and then night 2, you're going to get the main event of Roman and Cody. But speaking of The Rock, we move into the next WrestleMania 28, or as the tagline would say, once in a lifetime, until WrestleMania 29. But I digress. This pay-per-view was a year in build for the main event between John Cena and The Rock, 2 generational wrestlers. Basically, this was...
And 6 moves between them.
Yes, and basically this match was very sad to watch. I was not entertained by it. It was very slow. You could tell everything was off. I believe Rock got hurt during it. I believe Cena got hurt during it. I'm like, yeah, this is just the worst thing you can ever put together. But this, to me, that match was basically Rock Hogan, but now it's Rock Cena. But this happened in Miami Gardens, Florida. Obviously Miami, because Dwayne Johnson went to the University of Miami and is from that area. So, of course, yes, we're doing it in my home city, in my home state. So this card, again, not a bad card. We finally got a women's match over 5 minutes on this card. But, again, this card was actually decent until that match with Cena and The Rock. There were some outs that I could have, you know, not want to watch. But basically, and the funny thing is, I am going to mention this because we just mentioned them and they were on the pre-show and they moved up. The Usos were on the pre-show wrestling Primo and Epico for the tag team titles. But the very first match, this one disappointed me. 18 seconds.
That's why you got a 5-minute women's match. They had time to spare.
They had time to spare. Sheamus, Daniel Bryan, World Heavyweight title, 18 seconds.
18 minutes. 18
One
seconds.
kiss and a kick. That's all it took. Then you had Kane versus Randy Orton. That match I actually thoroughly enjoyed. And then you had the Cody Rhodes versus Big Show for the Intercontinental title. The moment for Big Show finally winning a title on a pay-per-view after so long. Then you had Kelly versus Maria Menounos from TV wrestling against Beth Phoenix and Eve Torres in a tag team match. Yes, another celebrity in another match. Then you had probably one of the best Hell in a Cells I've seen in a long time, just based on the story. Probably the best match on the card was The Undertaker and Triple H in the Hell in a Cell with Shawn Michaels as special guest referee. That match, to me, chef's kiss on that card. Then you had a throwaway 12-man team to determine general manager of both Raw and SmackDown. And you had John Laurinaitis' team win. Yeah, let's not talk about Johnny Ace right now. There's a lot of hot water he's in. But his team defeated Team Teddy Long. And then you had some weird thing going on with Eve Torres at the end with Zack Ryder. I don't know. It was weird. Then you had another solid match. And when we talked about it earlier, has Punk ever pinned anybody? Just remember this match. Punk beat Chris Jericho WWE title. Had he been disqualified, he would have lost it. But yes, he beat Chris Jericho straight up. And then again, your main event, The Rock versus John Cena. Jason, your takeaway from this card?
Well, I remember watching when the pay-per-view first came on and that Daniel Bryan Sheamus match. And I'm like, what the hell just happened?
Yep.
And I'm like, this is not Monday Night Raw. This is WrestleMania. What did I just witness here? I didn't remember Kane and Randy Orton. I'm sure it was a decent match. I've never been a fan of the way that the Big Show's been booked his entire career. As somebody that I met that man, and I am 6'2", and when I stood up next to him, I didn't ask for his autograph. I just, hey man, I ain't trying to bother you. I just want to stand up next to you. And he's like, that's fine. I'm looking for somebody. I came up, I don't know if you can see, but I came up to about right here. I was like, whoa. And his thighs were bigger around than my body. And they should have learned from Andre. I mean, because Show could talk, Andre couldn't. And to book him as an attraction, and if you're gonna put a title on him, put the world title on him and make it mean something when somebody takes it off of him. But you got somebody that's 7 foot tall, 450 pounds, and look how many jobs he wound up doing over the years. I just, you didn't have to book him as Andre, but you could have come close and made him an attraction from day one because of his size and everybody else. Skip down the tag to the Team Teddy and Johnny match. I don't remember how old I was when I found out Johnny Ace was Animal's brother, and I was just like,
yeah.
The dynamic dude is Road Warrior Animal. What? But Drew McIntyre, we talked about it a couple of WrestleManias ago. Have you ever heard him tell a story about the Claymore?
I can't remember if I have.
I think I have, but I don't remember it.
I don't do a great Scotsman, but I will do my best. He was still doing the 3-man band gimmick. He was in those leather pants, and somebody was asking him how he came up with the Claymore. It was pretty much on accident. Same way Jake come up with the DDT. Jake tripped, and the guy that he was wrestling had the foresight to hear the crowd and say, "Just pin me," and the DDT was born. But when Drew was talking about the Claymore, he was talking about doing the 3-man band gimmick, and his finish was just a big boot, kind of like Sheamus's. And he's like, and I'm a true Scotsman. I don't wear underwear. And I felt those pants ripping. And if I'd have just done the one boot, they'd have seen more of Drew than they wanted to see. So I just went up with both feet. and they liked it. So it stuck. And oh
my God.
I always get a kick out of hearing him tell that story.
That was the best Scottish impression I've heard.
It really was, yeah.
It was like a drunk William Wallace.
Yeah, CM Punk and Jericho, I didn't remember. To be quite honest with you, Rock and Cena, I get why it was the main event, but when you go back and look at a couple of the matches, especially the Hell in a Cell, and I say that for last because it goes back to 2 years ago when Taker told Shawn Michaels no. Taker was the one that asked for this rematch, and Triple H said no. And there had been pictures of the Undertaker surface because he hadn't been around in a while online, that he had cut his hair, and Triple H pointed it out. They showed the video on the Titantron. He pointed it out that yeah, you won, but I walked out, you didn't. And Taker come out with that horrible wig on Raw or SmackDown, whatever it was, and started cutting his hair, and it led up to Triple H finally saying okay to the rematch and Shawn being the referee. And that if you go back and watch that match, I mean, Shawn actually breaking down and throwing sweet chin music to the Undertaker and him falling right into the pedigree and still kicking out, and then Triple H picking up the sledgehammer and Shawn taking it away from him. And I mean, and then you see the picture behind me. It's one of the most iconic WrestleMania pictures, in my opinion, of all time. Was the three of those guys, kind of wrapping up that 4-year story there. And for me, that's the one that stands out.
Yeah. Danny, what's your takeaway from both that match and this card entirely?
So the card entirely, Lillian Garcia, America the Beautiful. I literally got goosebumps from her octave range. It was
I forgot how amazing she was. She really
is.
And a lot of people forget that she's actually a singer. Like that's the funny part. Like she's an announcer, but she sings too.
Yeah, she was just amazing. Daniel Bryan again, Sheamus. What did we watch? What was that? Was that like I blinked and I went like this and okay, or was it the lights went off? I don't know what happened there. I didn't even see a match. The only thing I saw Sheamus, and that was it. Okay, lovely. Kane and Orton, I felt like was recycled. Like it was just the same match over and again. Beth Phoenix and Eve versus Kelly, Maria Menounos, meh. Because again, I mean, Beth Phoenix is the only one worth watching. Trips versus Taker. that one they took each other to their limit. It was true Hell in a Cell form. You could see that Taker was in considerable pain, and Triple H wasn't moving that great either, I felt like, but I also felt like it was deja vu. You got Team Teddy versus Team Johnny, and then whoever got control of SmackDown. Dolph Ziggler couldn't get a push, but he got stuck in this match, which I thought was ridiculous. Zack Ryder was underrated, and I forgot about David Otunga, who many of you might remember was on I Love New York on VH1 when they had all the reality shows back then. Otunga fit in WWE, but the question of where did he fit best? Did he fit in the ring? Did he fit on commentary? Did he fit as a mouthpiece for somebody? You just had to figure it out. And sadly for John Laurinaitis, he didn't get his brother's brains or talent. You had Jericho versus Punk. Oh gosh, I can't read. Okay. Jericho was best as a heel, and then that counter fest where one did a move, then the other one did it, then they countered and countered and countered back and forth. That was a good match. The Cena versus Rock, it was earned ego versus ego, and I'll let you figure that one out. Rock looked good, and he really sold that ring rust. The one thing too that I thought was interesting, that there was a sign in the crowd that says, if Cena wins, we riot. Here is where Cena just got boring. Here is where Cena, it was like a da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na, and then we're all singing John Cena sucks. And that was just, again, too predictable for me. Like, you knew who was going to win. You knew what was going to happen. And it was the Super Cena sour show because it was Super Cena. We were all kind of sour because he was boring. And this was 2012. And by the next year at which one did I go? I went to Payback. He was boring. So again, it was a good card, but it just really made certain people boring. Other people stood out. Other people were a question of, hey, you look great in here, but we have to figure out where we can fit you best.
Yeah, I'm going to go real quick over this card because obviously, I pretty much had the same thoughts as both you guys. The Sheamus Daniel Bryan, I have no idea whose idea was that for Daniel Bryan to, lose at 18 seconds, but they really built a story out of it. And I think that's when the ascension of Daniel Bryan kind of came alive in WWE. Because surprisingly after that, he started teaming with Kane, with Team Hell No.
And that was hysterical.
That was they worked great together. I enjoyed that team. Such an underrated team. But then you got the push, which eventually we'll talk about tonight with WrestleMania 30. But you saw this was kind of like the downfall of Daniel Bryan, but then the build back up was just astounding. And now we see him now in AEW, and oh my God, he is he's putting on good matches. He's got a match with Will Ospreay coming up at Dynasty that I freaking cannot wait to watch.
I'll be working a 12-hour day, so I'll be keeping up with
especially after that promo from Will last night. Got me so pumped for that match.
Yeah.
Well, apparently he learned how to last longer than 18 seconds because Bree's still around.
That's true. That's true.
That was
yeah. I wonder how that family dynamic is right now with everything else. But Kane Orton, like I said, I kind of see where you're coming from, Danny, with the recycle. Yeah. I feel like we've seen Kane, Randy Orton before. Obviously, we have. But this Orton, then even seeing Orton now, the physique difference, he was huge back then, but now he's just bulked up after missing so much.
As I'm sitting here and gets up from nap, she's usually up 3:34. School days are typically a lot later nap days. And she's sitting here and she's 3 years and 4 months now, so almost 3.5. And she's like, Danny, what are you watching? And I'm like, wrestling. And she's actually sitting down watching it. Like she's seeing, you know, Orton just standing there, and then she's seeing, I think it was, yeah, she was watching Orton Batista, and I'm like, Randy Orton, and there's Batista. Batista's in the green. And she was actually watching 30 with me the other day, and she was just mesmerized. But then as I'm watching it, I'm like, to me, Orton looked skinny when he first started. He looked kind of scrawny because he's, what is he, 6'4", 6'5"?
Mm-hmm.
So he's got the height, but he was also kind of that slender build. But then by 30, I started noticing the change in the physique. And now to be Orton, what is Orton? Orton's 44 now. He will be 44. He looks amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's amazing seeing that match with Kane to what he is now. The Punk Chris Jericho match, thoroughly enjoyed. The story behind it was great. Like we said, heel Jericho's best Jericho. This is where he's basically doing the same shtick Punk did to Hardy during their feud about alcohol abuse, all this stuff, and he's basically talking about Punk's family. You know, like your dad's an alcoholic, your sister's this, blah 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 blah. It was just great storytelling in this match, and yeah, it's unfortunate it never main evented. You know, and this was from the pipe bomb. He goes that Dwayne is main eventing WrestleMania, and I'm not. You know, it's what he was saying. Like I said, the Rock Cena match, I kind of phased in and out of it. It was just for me, it was not paced well. And you can tell there was ring rust even on Rock, even though he just had that tag match with Cena at Survivor Series previously. I was like, he's still rusty. Like it's so much when you go and you do Hollywood stuff, and then come back and you're training in the ring just to get that rust off. You'd still see it was a little bit. And like I said, like he was hurt. You know, he hurt himself, and even Cena was hurt. Because the next night on Raw, Cena wanted to congratulate The Rock, and out comes Brock Lesnar returning, which a lot of people did not see coming.
Yeah.
Brock Lesnar at this time had gone off to UFC, done all that MMA stuff, won a title over there. But yeah, no, and definitely saving the best match for last, that Hell in a Cell match. The build towards it, like Jason was saying, the build towards it of Undertaker cutting his hair and basically him challenging Triple H, other than Shawn challenging Undertaker. The story behind it, even from the previous year, the way that they build towards him and Triple H at that first match, it was that night on Raw where Undertaker returned to Johnny Cash. I got chills. That was my favorite moment. And right as Undertaker's about to say something, Triple H comes out and just looks up at that WrestleMania sign. To that had the chills. But this one where they showed the vignettes of Undertaker watching the match from the year previous, and you see scissors cutting hair and all this stuff, and just having Shawn Michaels involved in it, you know, between those three men, you know, telling a story in that ring between the three of them. And Jason has mentioned it so many times, facial expressions. Mm-hmm. You see every single one of those guys' facial expressions in that match to a T, from everything from near falls to even Shawn Michaels trying to count a quick three and Taker kicking out, and he backs in the corner, sitting there going like this, you know, doing the whole like, oh God, what is going on? Like he's pondering. He's like, did I do the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? The whole story in that match was just breathtaking to me, and that's why I think that's the best match on the card. Jason, your take?
No, I'm trying not to interrupt you. I have a bad habit of doing that. No, I just, you know, like I said, I mean, I remember that, like the 2-year saga of the two of those guys, you know, switched to the, you know, you go back to the two with Shawn, like the first time around when after Triple H come out and looked up at the sign as you were talking about, and they started going back and forth in their promo battles where you just told Triple H you're pissed off because I retired your little buddy, and now you're all alone and blah blah blah. The realism they put into it, of, you know, with Shawn's retirement, and like I said, then the story being flipped from where Shawn challenging Taker and Taker saying no to Taker challenging Triple H and him saying no. You know, yeah, you got you won, but did you really? And putting that, you know, actually seeing Undertaker maybe have doubt for the first time in his career. You know, with some of the stuff that was going back and forth being said, and that's what I'll remember for this one.
Yeah. No, this match by far, probably one of the better Hell in a Cell matches I've seen in a while. but also just storytelling wise, probably one of the better matches I've seen in a while. Before we move on, I do want to answer this, kind of veer back to AEW because it's a great question. I'm sure everybody wants. Nathaniel wants to know about Adam Copeland and Christian.
Yeah, I got thoughts on that one too. So go ahead.
So for me, Toronto. I don't think there's a better place for Adam Copeland to win the title and hold it for a little longer than Toronto. Mm-hmm. We talked about it, I think, Tuesday on the Canada show, about how Copeland or Edge's last match in WWE was in Toronto. So a match where he has an opportunity to win a title and actually hold it without getting screwed out of it at the end of the night, this is kind of fitting to where he could. I had mentioned on that show that my prediction for that is I hope Copeland wins it, and I hope he holds it and loses it to a younger talent to kind of push them up another level, and Copeland loses it and kind of agrees with Christian to see where he was coming from, saying, I understand why you love that title now. I feel like I'm nothing without it. I understand you now. And that will kind of lead us back into Edge and Christian teaming one more time. So where Edge wins the title, Christian kind of falters and figures out where he goes from here. And maybe Christian screws Edge out of the title against someone else. And Edge comes up to him and says, I understand. I'm sorry. You were right. Let's win titles together. Let's win the tag titles together. So that's kind of where I see where they can veer in if they want to plan one more Edge and Christian run. That's kind of the storyline you can go. Jason?
Well, I think he's going to win, and I think it's the wrong call. In my opinion, I'll tell you why I think that. I like Samoa Joe. I always have. But when you're flipping channels, and I go to this all the time when it comes to AEW, because I want them to get more viewers. It's not a matter of I'm crapping on AEW. I watch it every week, just like, I never go into a week saying, oh, I'm going to like this better. I watch them all and make my decision at the end of the week on which one was my favorite for the week. But to me, when you have somebody with the star power of Adam Copeland, who 95% of the wrestling community still refers to as Edge, and you put the secondary title on him, it's going to outshine the world title, in my opinion. And I don't want to see that happen. And so I agree with you that they will wind up together somehow, some way. I don't know how they're going to do it. I think when they wind up together, I think it's going to be what Adam Copeland said when he first started the feud with Christian, that, his little followers were going to see him for what he was, and then he'd have to be there to pick up the pieces and save the day. I think that's more along the line. So when they do team, they'll be faces, and the crowd can cheer Edge and Christian all over again. But like I said, do I think he's going to win? Yeah, because how do you make Edge say I quit? And Christian with his character right now, very easy to see him saying I quit. With the way his character goes, I just think it's the wrong move.
Gotcha. Danny, your prediction?
I'm going to say Edge doesn't win. He comes close, but you're going to have interference from Nick Wayne, Mama Wayne, Luchasaurus. You're going to have some sort of interference, which could set up another match at there's Dynasty. What's after Dynasty? I think I
believe it's Double or Nothing.
Double or Nothing, which you could have a match at Double or Nothing. You could even take this into, I wouldn't see it lasting to Forbidden Door, but I would definitely see possibly going into a match at Dynasty and ending at Double or Nothing, or going even to Double or Nothing, and then whatever pay-per-view is after Forbidden Door, which would be All In, but I don't see it stretching that far. I don't see him winning because, again, I see the interference. However, if there is a chance he does, I could see him putting Daniel Garcia over, because Dan Garcia is getting better. He's getting over. I am really digging the guy. Matt Menard, Angelo Parker, I do like them, but they can't stand alone each other. But Danny Garcia, I could definitely see him going with Edge for a title run.
Yeah, Yeah, some good predictions there. We'll have to see. Go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, she talked about Menard and Parker. 2.0 is a good tag team.
Yeah.
And, I love tag team wrestling. I always have. And I think both companies are dropping the ball. I miss the Usos being together, to be honest with you, because
me too.
There's nobody on the roster, WWE wise, that comes close to them. I mean, I know people like the New Day, but that shtick is so old to me. New Day comes on, I'll leave the room because I know what's going to happen. I mean, they may win, they may lose, but they're going to dance. They're going to play the trombone. They're going to, it's been 11, 12 years of that. I'm over it. But, I like FTR, but they've kind of, they've dwindled them down to different stuff now. And I know he's got some charges coming up that he's got to deal with. He can't really have the titles on him right now. Not that I say you think you should put the titles on them all the time, but I think they're missing the boat, pumping up some of these younger tag teams they have. And I would have no issue with them putting the titles on the Bucks because they're, how established they are. But I think in the grand scheme of things, when it comes down to this feud, I hope they give us a swerve and, it kind of goes back to Adam's prediction of, because Jungle Boy seems to be, or Jack Perry, whatever you want to call him, seems to be doing well with his heel gimmick over in Japan right now.
Yeah.
And you see the tension building up between Christian and Luchasaurus. And instead of Luchasaurus turning babyface, Jack Perry comes to save the day with his buddy and, not save the day, but join his friend once again and say, kind of like what you said, you were right. Because, Luchasaurus turned heel before Jack Perry did. And, you were right. And then Adam Copeland's got to make the save.
Yeah. No, a lot of good predictions. We'll have to find out when it happens next week in Toronto. I'm sure we'll get more matches announced for that show too in the coming days. Besides that match, I think we have a few more announced. I know we're going to hear from Mercedes again next Wednesday. So very excited to see what else she's got to say. So yeah, next week should be really good. Obviously, we've got our Rampage tomorrow night and Collision on Saturday. So lots of stuff to build up for. But with that said, we move on to WrestleMania 29 in New York, New Jersey. This card, again, almost a rehash of last year with some different matches, different matchups, but the same main title match, John Cena and The Rock. This time for the WWE title. This happens because CM Punk loses it to The Rock at Royal Rumble. But this card in general wasn't the worst card. There was actually wrestling in it. But also this was a card that we had a few of them, no women's matches in it. But we did have at least 9 matches on this card. One of the pre-show matches, the only one, was The Miz actually winning the Intercontinental title off Wade Barrett. But the main pay-per-view starts off with The Shield. They had just pretty much debuted at tail end of the previous year. And now they're kind of a big thing now. So it's The Shield. They have a 6-person match against Big Show, Randy Orton, Sheamus. Then you had Mark Henry versus Ryback. You remember that guy? Amy Moore? Oh, yeah. Yes. But and I'll tell an interesting thing I just read the other day about Ryback. But Team Hell No, like I mentioned previously, the kind of formation of Daniel Bryan and Kane.
They were so good together.
Wrestling for the tag titles against Big E Langston and Dolph Ziggler with AJ Lee. Then you had a shocking win of Fandango over Chris Jericho. And by the way, Dirty Dango is doing magnificent in TNA. If anybody has not watched him in TNA right now, he's doing phenomenal work over there as Dirty Dango.
I'm still trying to figure out how I can watch TNA being a Hulu streamer and it's not on my Hulu.
Right. I'm sure there's ways, but it's one of the things I want. Like I've got a channel on my smart TV that it's Impact Zone. So I watch all old school and new school TNA. And then your next match was the World Heavyweight title between Alberto Del Rio and Jack Swagger. This is when Alberto was a face, which was weird because he worked so much better as a heel. Then you had Undertaker versus CM Punk, probably one of the better storytellings of a match. And then you had the Triple H, Brock Lesnar, My Career's on the Line match, no holds barred with Triple H. And then you had John Cena and The Rock for the WWE title. So Jason, we'll start with you. Your take on this card.
There's 3 things from this card that I remember. build up and the card. This was kind of the era where CM Punk really became a pain in the ass to deal with. Mm-hmm. This is where I think we like when I first started coming on and talking, when it was pointed out to me that he was Connor's favorite wrestler, that I get why CM Punk was upset. I know he wanted the main event WrestleMania. He carried the title for 450 some days, 454 if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then they had just had him, drop it to a guy that hadn't wrestled in almost a year. I get the frustration. But then he got put in the program with The Undertaker, with Paul Heyman, of course. This is when Heyman was with CM Punk. And, it was very well known how displeased backstage he was with this. And to me, it's like, look, dude, I get it, but you're wrestling The Undertaker, man, who has been the main event more times than you'll ever be considered for. Mm-hmm. So instead of, griping about it, go out there and do the best you can and try to take that main event spot next year. It's not in your decision making to do that. So control what you can control instead of being a pain in the ass backstage. Now, like I said, I think this is when his angry personality really started the show. He felt more comfortable with that new contract he had gotten, the Cult of Personality coming out. He felt like, that he got a little too big for his britches, no matter champion or not. And then I remember Fandango beating Chris Jericho, and I was like, whoa, okay, that happened. And then leading up to this one as well, I remember this was coming up to this is when they really started kind of to acknowledge Triple H's role backstage with Brock Lesnar. And, Brock Lesnar coming out and putting in the Kimura over and over again. Triple H actually, not backing down from Brock and going out there and, really, I mean, he got his shots in, but, he took a pretty good ass whipping from Brock and then winded up winning in the end. And then, of course, everybody already knew that John Cena was going to beat The Rock and become champion and move on. So I remember watching this pay-per-view and getting up and going to do something after Triple H and Brock Lesnar, because I'm like, well, we already know Cena's winning. So,
yeah. Danny, your take.
So this card was, again, the first year that we didn't have, I don't think anyone's saying America the Beautiful. You had Sheamus, Orton, and Show versus The Shield. And it was The Shield's first WrestleMania. And then Sheamus, of course, needed Orton to look good and Show to balance it out, because I'm not that big on Sheamus. Hang on. You had Ryback versus Mark Henry, and I was confused if I saw Ryback or one of the Ninja Turtles in the ring. I was still confused about that one. And then I'm confused as to what we even watched back then. You had Dolph Ziggler, who again was a Money in the Bank winner, with Big E versus Team Hell No. Hell No was entertaining. Fandango versus Jericho. Jericho was hysterical again with that name calling. And he, if I remember, I believe he was the face and Fandango was the heel. I don't remember, but yeah. I don't know what the deal with the Fandango gimmick was, or if it was actually needed. You had the Rocky theme was kind of nice, because I do love that Rocky theme. You had Hager versus Del Rio, and I'm just kind of because I was always kind of on Del Rio. Hager had some moments, but it wasn't enough to really get me interested. What was really good on this card was that Punk versus Taker, because Paul Bearer passed away about a month before that WrestleMania, which I know probably was a shock to a lot of people. But again, Punk was gold as a heel here, and this was a nice story that they told. They really told this story with with the urn, with Punk stealing the urn, and then you also had a nice tribute to Paul Bearer, who was also known as Percy Pringle, I think in World Class Championship Wrestling in the 80s. That was a very nice tribute that you had to have told a story. That attempted last ride onto the table where Punk countered it was nice. You had, what else did you have in here? You had the in-ring psychology by Punk was good, which you don't see a lot of that anymore. Taker moved well, but you could see he was aged. Triple H versus Lesnar, the only questions I have, did the winner of the match get a lifetime supply of Jimmy John's? Because here's where we came out in the Jimmy John's hat, the Jimmy John shorts, and it made me want to get Jimmy John's. They were both kind of slow in this match. I felt like Triple H was getting up there, Lesnar was getting up there. Jimmy John's made sandwiches faster for a line of people than the way this match moved. And then you had the Hall of Fame ceremony, and who knew back then that Donald Trump, who was in that Hall of Fame class, would end up being a president. And then
yes, this WrestleMania was huge.
Yeah. And then we had Snooze Fest, Cena versus Rock. Listen to that crowd reaction for both. You had people that were booing Cena. You had people that were just kind of, oh, Cena's here. You had some people cheering The Rock, but you had people, they're here for The Rock. It's here's where we started seeing the predictability, and I feel like the recycling from creative. And this is again where Cena was getting stale. And honestly, Cena was staler than Clearance Bakery at a double clearance price. I was at Payback 2013. We were booing the hell out of the guy. I mean, he in Chicago, we were booing him. I was, again, one of the only few women in the place that was actually booing him. And, you know, if you remember the song that they sing, John Cena sucks back then, and then you get the women and the kids saying, let's go Cena. Here's where Cena was shoved down our throats, kind of like how Roman was when he first, broke out into singles. We already knew the predictability, what was going to happen. And it was, again, why watch it? Because, well, Cena's going to win anyway.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from this card was it was nice to see the Shield actually wrestle the match, because I remember seeing them in NXT, because NXT was still that developmental territory that, it wasn't black and gold yet, but it would be black and gold after the Shield basically debuted. Like, say 2015 until 2019, 2020, you had the black and gold NXT. So about a year after this WrestleMania, you kind of saw the black and gold, and the Shield was like the last increments of what old school NXT was before they kind of, then you had the Sami Zayns, the Kevin Owens, the Shinsuke's, the Bobby Rhodes. So NXT really changed as soon as the Shield debuted. So it was really nice to see them wrestle. And again, like Jason said, you never knew what to do with Big Show with his booking. Face, heel, because in this match, he punches both Randy Orton and Sheamus and just walks off. Yeah. So you really didn't know. The Team Hell No, always entertaining. I always loved the pairing of Daniel Bryan and Kane. I don't know why. The therapy sessions were great.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
I will say I was very shocked at the Fandango win over Chris Jericho. This is how the crowd did the John Cena sucks. This is when the crowd also started singing Fandango's theme. Like that, they just did it out of nowhere. The Raw after WrestleMania, which people consider is always bizarre land, because the Raw after WrestleMania is always weird and the crowd is kind of mixed and weird.
Right.
But they give great reactions. And that crowd the night after Raw, just every time they would just hum Fandango's theme.
And that's really, they kind of kicked off what we get today with a lot of people's themes.
Right, exactly. A lot of people do that now where the crowd gets involved with it. Didn't really care for Alberto and Swagger. Taker and Punk, obviously storytelling wise, really good. I think that was the best match on the card. I think the compelling story of Punk basically smearing the name of Paul Bearer. The dumping the ashes on his body and on Taker during that segment, and hell, even Paul Heyman coming out dressed as Paul Bearer was just bizarro. And
I think he's fatter than Paul Bearer now.
I think so now. Yeah, no, he's not the wise man. He's the wider man.
Or the supersized man.
Yeah, supersized man. Which is weird because you got to see Paul Heyman twice on this pay-per-view with both Brock Lesnar and CM Punk. But yeah, no, the Undertaker Punk match, great storytelling. I think this was one of Punk's better matches in his career. I could have cared less for Triple H, Brock Lesnar, because how many times are we going to see Triple H's ego kind of be like inflate.
And Jimmy John's too.
And Jimmy John's. Yes, I definitely wanted Jimmy John's. And then again, yeah, the John Cena Rock match was just throwaway because I knew John Cena was going to win. I think I was about 10 minutes, 15 minutes in the match, and I'm just like, I think I'm done with this pay-per-view.
Did you fall asleep?
I just went and did something else.
I think I might have fallen asleep.
I didn't watch. I barely watched most of the card. Most of the matches I watched was a Miz on the pre-show because I'm a Miz guy. I love the work he does. I enjoyed the Shield. Watched Team Hell No. I watched Fandango's match, Taker's Punk, a little bit of Triple H, Brock Lesnar, and then the Cena Rock match. I was done after 10, 15 minutes because I knew the outcome, and I think the crowd did too. But this card, I mean, again, not a bad card. We're not on WrestleMania 9 levels as far as bad card, but it is the card. It is the card where you're like, all right. And this was actually the last pay-per-view I believe The Rock wrestled at until he had that quick match he had against Eric Redbeard at one of the WrestleManias we'll talk about next week. But even that was like a 8-second match. But yeah, but this card wasn't too bad. I guess that's my take on it. Do we have any final words on this card?
Well, I'll just say this as far as like, we all talked about basically knowing John Cena was going to win that match of, why, nobody really cared for it because we already knew the outcome. It was The Rock coming back, taking the title off CM Punk, which I didn't care for. But coming back to redo the favor for John Cena. But it goes back to where I was not excited for this WrestleMania to why I am for this one coming up because I have no idea. And, same guy and no idea.
Yeah. This WrestleMania 29 definitely had its ups and downs, but it wasn't the worst card. It wasn't the greatest card. The next pay-per-view, though, I would probably put in my top 10. Probably not just more so of the moments of it, but just some of the just shocking moments and just some of the matchups were really fun to watch.
Well, before we go to this one real quick, I will say that the last 5 matches that The Undertaker had between the 2 Michaels, the 2 Triple H, and the CM Punk was well deserved because of all that crap he had to carry those years before.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to go back in all his matches. I think up until Shawn Michaels, unless I'm forgetting one, I think the best match he had at WrestleMania was with Ric Flair.
Yes.
I mean, because he got tossed a lot of bad crap at WrestleMania. And like I said, that Ric Flair match had a good story behind it. He had a good match, and the Arn Anderson, blah, 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 we've talked about. But like I said, that 5-match stretch for Taker was well deserved.
Yeah. And this card alone, this pay-per-view, which by the way, I think had one of the coolest logos for, being in New Orleans and stuff like that. They had the whole, like the Mardi Gras mask and like the, everything like that. It was really cool to see in Louisiana, but this card alone was not bad. Again, pre-show, you had the Usos on there defending the titles. Then the main show started this was actually the year build of the Yes Movement for Daniel Bryan, or Bryan Danielson to us in AEW. This is where he had to earn his right to go for the title. Obviously, it all stemmed from Triple H not seeing him as a main event guy, and the Authority basically was running everything and basically trying to screw him out of everything because they didn't think he was the right guy. So the first match on the card was Daniel Bryan and Triple H, and the winner would be added to the world title match. This stems from Batista winning the Royal Rumble when nobody wanted him to win the Royal Rumble, and he kind of embraced that heel persona. And this was when Randy Orton was champion at the time. So that started us off. Then you had a quick 6-man tag between the Shield and Kane and the New Age Outlaws. Then you had the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, which I believe was the very first one. The first Andre the Giant Memorial Battle. And Cesaro, our boy, Claudio, won this one by last eliminating Big Show. I remember this moment because the next night on Raw, Cesaro kind of broke away from his group with Jack Swagger and those guys and said, "I'm a Paul Heyman guy." Yeah, and said, "I'm a Paul Heyman guy," and kind of aligned himself with Paul Heyman, which I thought was genius. Then obviously your next match, I kind of was upset about because I thought this other person should have got a push, but it was John Cena against Bray Wyatt. And honestly, the story we got from this going into WrestleMania 38 or 39, the Firefly Funhouse, which we'll get to, really, I love encapsulated this story. And then you had Brock Lesnar against The Undertaker. Shocker of a match. Then you had a women's invitational, the Vicky Guerrero invitational match for the Divas title. And it was won by AJ Lee, CM Punk's wife. Also in that match, it was Oksana, Alicia Fox, Brie Bella, Cameron, Emma, Eve Marie, Layla, Naomi, Natalia, Nikki Bella, Rosa Mendez, Summer Rae, and Tamina Snuka. And then, of course, the main event, you had Daniel Bryan against Batista and Randy Orton for the World Heavyweight title. So, Jason, we'll start with you. Your thoughts?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I know this was the rise of Daniel Bryan, the Yes Movement, the crowd taking over. But from what I remember and seeing on online and everything, this is, Batista did that little bit of run with Evolution, but I mean, he was pissed, and that's why he abruptly left so quickly again. Because, and I get it. I mean, Batista was a monster. And then you go have, in his eyes, the little guy tap him out. AJ Lee's always been my favorite women's wrestler. I loved AJ Lee. I loved her skipping. And that's the only CM Punk shirt I own is the one that says "I dig crazy chicks." And that was when they were doing the whole gimmick between the two of them.
Yeah.
John Cena again going over. Cesaro, I was glad to see finally get a push. Winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, the Shield. I thought they could have been in a better spot here. Steve Austin and the Hulk Hogan and The Rock opening it up, and I believe this is the one where he said that he was at the wrong dome, and he
thought it was the Silver Dome.
And the one that we all have feelings about. I mean, I know I'm covering a lot of that stuff quick, but just I mean, really, there's only two memorable moments from here. It was the rise of Daniel Bryan winning the title, and then Brock Lesnar defeating The Undertaker. And I had said I'd probably, because I knew Taker was getting older, and me and some buddies had talked about it. And, that was a topic of conversation. Should The Undertaker ever lose at WrestleMania? My take on it was this. I wanted him to lose one match at WrestleMania. I wanted it to be his final match. I wanted him here's the Booker in me coming out. Because you know how many times over his career he would come out, the Druids would roll him out in the casket and raise it up, and he would raise up out of the casket. I would rather, I didn't want it to be Brock Lesnar. I wanted it to mean something. He lost at WrestleMania for the first time, and to me it meant nothing. But I wanted to see him lose when he was ready to retire and him just lay there. I didn't want him to get up and do the Shawn Michaels wave and all that stuff. I wanted him to lay there. The lights go dim. You can see what's coming. Have the Druids roll the casket out, put him in the casket, roll it out, and then have Mark Calloway come out the next night on Raw and say his goodbyes. That was what I wanted for The Undertaker. Never really winning the whole booking thing, but that was my dream for The Undertaker when he was ready to go. And like I said, this just, by the, when they, if they had even saved it for Roman, with what they're doing with Roman now, I could have got it. But I mean, out of all the people to beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania, you always want it to mean something, especially with something that huge. And he's talked about it. He said, he told Vince, he's like, once we do this, we can't undo it. This is not something we can undo. And I know, and I don't know. There's a lot of things in wrestling I can wrap around my head and go, I can see why they did that. This is probably the one thing I will never understand why they did.
Real quick, from my understanding, it was actually done 4 hours before it was the final decision.
Yeah,
according to an interview with Shawn Michaels, he had confirmed that Vince had come up with it 4 hours before the show, saying that it's Brock Lesnar who's ending the streak.
And again, I mean, Brock's real. I mean, it's not like it's not like it's not believable. with Brock being a former UFC champion, former, NCAA collegiate champion. It's not like it's not real, but to me it didn't do anything for Brock. If Brock would have lost, it wouldn't have hurt him. And like I said, that should have, no matter how they did it, that should have been for the next guy, in my opinion, to really put the next guy over and have that, I mean, look at what Roman Reigns could add to what he says now. Take The Rock out of the equation, which is the last 3 years of Roman Reigns and the bloodline, and I'm this, I'm that. He could have added, and I beat the Undertaker. I mean, it would have done something for Roman, especially at the start of that 3-year run. But again, I mean, it's just popcorn fart. I mean, it's like, it was shocking, but it didn't mean anything. And I was thoroughly disgusted with it.
Yeah. Danny, what's your take on this whole card and the Undertaker streak ending?
So this was you opened with Hogan, Austin, The Rock. Fun little segment, but you got to wonder who had the biggest ego. You had Daniel Bryan versus Trips. Daniel Bryan again was just amazing. He's a shorter guy. He's like 5'8", 5'9", and the guy can go and amazing. Again, Triple H was moving really slow. You could definitely see the ego here. Shield versus New Age Outlaws and Kane. This was a fun match. I felt like the Shield was slowly starting to get over from what I remember. And they broke them up the day, what was it? I went to that Payback then too, and they broke them up like shortly after, because they have that match with Evolution at Payback. And then the day after that, on that Raw after Payback, is when Seth Rollins, I think, turned on the Shield. So they broke them up too quickly, and all three of them, whether it was Ambrose, Reigns, or Rollins, they all had areas that they were good in, but areas to improvement, and they worked together well as a unit. Cesaro was so underrated and held down. I'm surprised he wasn't even pushed harder, because the guy was amazing. You had Bray versus Cena, and this was kind of heartbreaking to watch now because of what would be happening here. And then there, and again, the question that I have is, the heart condition that Bray supposedly had, could that have been aggravated from wrestling? And at this point, Cena again was officially boring. I remember being at that Payback and saying, and that was after WrestleMania, there was this cute little girl who was 7 years old, sitting next to me. She was a huge John Cena fan. She had on the hat, she had on the armband, she had the shirt on. She charmed me out of Twizzlers and Go bracelets. And as I'm yelling, John Cena sucks, she's yelling, let's go Cena. Cutest little thing. And this was the one where I held up a sign, happy birthday to Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. And they actually elbowed each other and pointed it and noticed it from where I was. And I felt so important. Vicky and her screeching. Oh my God. That scares me. That kills me. Eddie would be proud. Women's match for the title. Again, I felt like this was around the time that they started the show. I think Total Divas, which had the Bellas. Who else was it? Summer Rae was in there. And again, if Nikki Bella hadn't been seeing John Cena, she wouldn't have gotten where she was today. So Nikki, thank your stars, and John, thank God you dumped her, because you deserve better. This was, I felt more, is when you saw more of the change in women's wrestling, and they were actually trained for it. And then AJ, interesting, was still there. And this was after Punk walked out, obviously, in January, and she won. And I'm wondering if they were trying to, smooth things over. Like maybe they were going to give him that time to, take that break that he needed. But then were they trying to get him to come back or anything? You had Taker versus Lesnar. Taker looked really slow here, kind of sluggish. And then do we know if he got any Jimmy John in the back? And was it Taker's choice to end the streak, which I thought was interesting to end it here. And then you had your final match. You had RKO. Whoever sings this theme song sounded really good, actually. You had Batista, RKO and Daniel Bryan. Of course, Daniel Bryan won. And Batista once said that, he quoted as saying that he left before because he didn't like the direction the company was going in. But then the question I have, what was the purpose of immediately inserting him in the title picture? And again, I get why Punk was, not happy with this. And I get why he left, because here's a guy who left, who referring to Batista, who had a great look to him. He could go in the ring. The guy was a powerhouse. The guy was like what Mason Ryan wanted to be and what Wardlow is trying to be now, but Wardlow being, Batista now, obviously. And, here's the guy that was there. He left. He comes back. He gets inserted in the title picture, and Punk's like, wait a second, why am I not in this? So to what Jason was saying, that's where you started getting that angry side of Punk, where he was angry and bitter. I get it. But then it was also like, what was the purpose other than nepotism and being Triple H's buddy?
Well, you go with Batista as well. I mean, and instead of sticking around and bitching about it, Batista came back, won the Royal Rumble, and was supposed, promised the title at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And because of the crowd backlash and them wanting Daniel Bryan, they changed gears and went that way. And Batista was, legitimate. He's talked about it before. He was legitimately upset.
Yeah.
And that's why he just, instead of sticking around and griping about it the way Punk did for a while, he just said, you know what? Deuces, I'm out.
Yeah. That's how I felt, honestly, with my teaching career when they promised me a leadership position, refused to give it to me. And they were like, well, we can't do this, but we can do this. I was like, then the ultimate thing happened where we had too much toxic, things going on. And I was like, you're really going to believe what you hear? I was like, I was out. I sent an email and I was done. So
you talk about Randy Orton's theme music getting played. I don't know which one it was. I'm not real good with remembering which.
Yeah,
it was Voices. They did a live cover of Voices, and it sounded really great.
I was talking about the live performances. My two favorite live performances of WrestleMania entrances was Motorhead playing Triple H to the ring.
Yes. Yeah.
But my favorite one, and I don't remember the name of the group, was when Bray Wyatt's band, played them to the ring.
Yep.
That night. And I thought that was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed. I actually did enjoy Shinsuke's entrance. I believe it was WrestleMania 34 against AJ Styles, and they had Nita Strauss, the guitarist for Alice Cooper, playing the theme, him down to the ring with a bunch of other drummers and violinists. I thought that was the coolest live performance of an intro. But yeah, to take away from what you guys said about this card, again, I think the biggest takeaway is the shocker of the streak. According to Vince, he did come back out a few weeks after that Shawn Michaels thing and said, yeah, it was me. He said he couldn't see anyone else on the roster other than Lesnar being the guy to break that streak. And he was kind of looking at it to kind of push for what was happening next WrestleMania. Obviously, some of the aftermath of this WrestleMania, Daniel Bryan was hurt. He had to relinquish the title. And obviously, we got Boring Cena back as world champion. But surprisingly, Brock returned at SummerSlam and won the title in a domination of John Cena. Nobody thought it was going to happen, that John Cena was going to be dominated like that. But Lesnar won that title and held on to it for a while. But this whole card was interesting. The Shield, I feel, could have gotten a longer match. I was very happy Cesaro, Claudio got a push in that win. Again, John Cena, Bray Wyatt. Again, that should have been a big moment for Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania winning. That could have shot him to the moon, winning against John Cena. Obviously, we see what happened years down the road at the Firefly Funhouse match where he actually did get his redemption technically, even though it was a sold-out arena, pre-recorded match. The AJ Lee, this is what's interesting. The sad thing about AJ Lee getting pushed with the title, as I would say, was more of a kind of a sly at Punk for walking out, saying, we'll give your wife a title, but you're a crybaby, so you could enjoy your wife having it. But the funny part is, the next night on Raw, do you guys remember it was Paige came out and kind of went one-on-one with AJ. Go ahead.
It was squashed her real quick.
Yes, it was AJ Lee actually said, "I'll put my title on the line right now," and Paige dominated like real quick and won.
Looked like Samoa Joe versus Wardlow.
Exactly. But it's sad because later down, Danny, you were asking like, was this a way of trying to get Punk back? Unfortunately, it wasn't, because they served him his termination papers on his wedding.
Well, and that's what that story has been told. Yeah, and there's not a lot of things that if you've ever watched the Stone Cold podcast with Vince McMahon, there's not many things the man says that I believe. But when he talked about that situation and he was asked about it by Austin, that I believe him. He said, that's a whole separate department that does this stuff. It's a trickle down effect. He goes, and I'm going to, publicly apologize to him for it being delivered to him on such a special day, but it was not done intentionally. So that's probably the one thing that Vince has ever said that I believe.
Right. But overall, I think AJ Lee winning it, and I think a lot of us are waiting for AJ Lee to come back to WWE one more time. Obviously, with Punk being there, I know she's got her hands full doing some other stuff. I know she's in charge of WoW, and stuff like that. She's one of the execs over there, I believe.
She just recently left. She had left like right after he came back.
You're right. Yeah. I remember her contract was just up as the exec. But I actually did enjoy the Daniel Bryan moment of winning the title, just because I loved it. I remember him from Ring of Honor and stuff like that. So it was very cool to see a guy go from independence to Ring of Honor to WWE and win a world title, that I know of, that I followed. But the overall pay-per-view was great. It kind of built for the year. And pretty much the aftermath, it was huge because, obviously we got Brock Lesnar winning the title, Daniel Bryan kind of leaving because of injury. Then you had, in that September of that year, you had the debut of Stardust, Cody's least favorite character he had to do.
Yeah, you're right.
Where they won the tag reign from the Usos, because the Usos had won the tag titles and they lost them to that. The Authority started to kind of fall apart. Also, you had, Paige and AJ kind of feud over the Divas title a little bit. And obviously the streak ending kind of led into the following year's WrestleMania, which we'll cover. But to give everybody a preview, basically Brock went in against Roman Reigns, and Seth Rollins cashed in. That was the famous Seth Rollins cash-in.
And my favorite cash-in by far.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yes.
I'll tell you talk about Daniel Bryan Danielson. A lot of people got so upset over the NXT thing, the Nexus thing, with them bringing him in and putting him with The Miz. And I thought it was one of my favorite stories because they were taking the dig at the actual pro wrestling fans that knew who he was, that knew who Bryan Danielson was. And I found it hysterical just because his facial expressions when The Miz, who's been wrestling at that point, 5-6 years roughly, maybe, if that long, trying to give this guy who can just go in there and run circles around people advice, and the facial expressions, and then The Miz going, "You think you know it all because you've been on the indie scene for all these years." I thought it was great TV. I mean, yes, they were kind of taking a dig, but it was also, the wink, wink, nod, nod. We know, but I thought it was great TV, and that feud lasted a long time.
Yeah, no, it was a great feud. And they even feuded over the U.S. title. Their moment on the
talking smack,
smack. When that moment where he's like, "I want to hit you, but I can't," and it becomes the better man and walks away. Like that, just the build to it is so great. And that's why I'm so thrilled about this match with Will Ospreay. These guys have never faced each other. They're two of the best technical wrestlers I've seen. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited to see where they go with the match. And obviously, in this one, you have to put Will over, right?
Well, that's kind of where I was getting ready to say. It was, you kind of like, you're pretty sure you already know what the finish is going to be.
Yeah. But yeah, no. So that's pretty much all the WrestleManias we have for you guys tonight. Any last takes on WrestleMania 30 before we kind of wind down here?
No, I was emotional watching it because of one certain person who you might as well say that he got his closure that he needed with Vince McMahon, and that was Warrior.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I was actually going to bring that up too. Warrior in the Hall of Fame that year. Unfortunately, the next night on Raw was his final appearance ever in public, as he, I believe, had a heart attack.
The very next morning.
The very next morning.
It was evening, I think.
No, they were leaving the hotel. He was putting bags in the car that next morning.
Yeah, so very sad. And like Danny said, a good closure on the Warrior. That's basically where the birth of the Warrior Award came from after his passing.
It was so eerie though. If you go back and you didn't really notice it that night, but if you go back and watch that now, after knowing he passed away less than 24 hours after that, just how out of breath he was, how beat red he was. Just he didn't run down the aisle like he used to, just walking down the aisle and then talking about when your heart takes that final beat and what's left is your legacy and everything. It's just very eerie.
Yes. It really is. It was. And I remember that because I just remembered watching it and I noticed how red he was. And there was just something, as I was watching it, you could see something different in his eyes. Like my grandmother used to tell me that the eyes are the windows to the soul. And there's just something different about him. But then I think the other emotional part of it, obviously, is Luke Harper, who we knew as Brody Lee in AEW. That was a complete shock to me. And then, of course, Bray passing away 6 months ago.
Well, I will tell you on a personal note, you talk about, Brody Lee. And, I looked it up. I wasn't real sure, once he passed and I didn't know what he had. And when I looked it up, it was documented that he passed away from pulmonary fibrosis of the lungs. And you can correct my timeline on this, because to me it was like he went out and was dead less than a year later. I moved down to Myrtle Beach in 2021. That had always been my goal to do. And as soon as I signed my lease, my dad was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, and they gave him a 3 to 5 year lifespan. And we are now coming up on the 3rd year, and he's getting progressively worse by the day. The reason that I moved back here to the Virginia area was to be close to him and help with what I needed. And when I moved back, the house that I had found was 2 doors over, so I could be close to walk in. My youngest daughter was, so excited that Dad was coming back, because she'd always lived with me except while I was at the beach, because she didn't want to leave her friends and everything else. And the morning the U-Haul was in the driveway was the morning she was killed in a car wreck. So you talk about Brody Lee, like that just hits home for me. So, but as far as the wrestling goes, the Warrior had a lot of bad stuff happen to him, but everybody will tell you it was of his own doing. The way he treated people, the way he acted. And Brody Lee's kind of like Sting. You don't hear anybody say a bad word about the man.
No.
So, again, not to get off topic on that, but, Brody Lee and what he was diagnosed with, just what he passed from, just, it's kind of personal to me.
Yeah, it's very weird talking about it, considering all the names we brought up and their passings. I know it's not easy to lose someone that you care about. It's also harder, to kind of go on and kind of, but also kind of remember them is also both a blessing and a curse. And with Warrior's heart, his heart attack, I think to my dad's pushing 70 and he's got 3 valves in his chest. He's had multiple mild strokes, and he's still kicking, and he got over skin cancer. But it's someone I look up to, my dad, I look up to him. And so we talk about it. We talk about loving your loved ones. And I want to answer someone's post earlier on the chat. They were asking where Connor was. Connor has a family emergency right now. And we wish him nothing but the best and love and support and prayers for him and everything he's going through. I won't go into details because it's his private business. And I respect it. He told me, but I'm not going to share it. But we got to cherish the ones we love, and it's crazy to think over the last couple of WrestleManias we covered, a lot of people we cover are no longer with us. We talked about it in, the 90s WrestleManias with Owen Hart and, you know, Andre, you know, and now recently with Bray and Warrior and Luke and Brody. And I'm trying not to end on a somber note, but I guess on a high note, it's just always, you know, hug the ones you love and everything like that.
Well, I'll say this, you know, just, you know, trying, maybe it doesn't really light it up, but the Warrior was kind of the end of what you saw, where we went through so many with Eddie, with Davey Boy, Rick Rude. I mean, all those guys from the late 80s, early 90s that were so into drugs, steroids, and everything else. You know, the passings that we've dealt with here lately were, you know, natural causes. It wasn't because of the stuff they put in their body and their heart finally exploded, and, you know, whatever the case may be. So, you know, hopefully that's all we have to, you know, talk about for a long time to come. And these guys, you know, live well into their 70s and 80s, and, you know, can go back and do these Comic-Cons and podcasts and, you know, be Kevin Von Erich and hanging out in Hawaii. And, you know, and despite all the tragedy he's dealt with, you know, have a smile on his face and enjoy the family he has now, and look back at what he had, but smile about it and being able to keep their legacy going.
I mean, the fact that he's living in Hawaii is just a dream of mine. You know, I'm like, I want to go to Hawaii. Come on. Like, I can be on a beach all day. But yes, so that concludes our show tonight for WrestleManias 26 through 30. I want to thank Jason and Danny for coming on, discussing these pay-per-views with me tonight. Very exciting. We're getting closer and closer to WrestleMania. Obviously, we got a lot of other fun stuff coming up. You know, we've got Dynamite coming around next week with more Mercedes and a big I Quit match in Toronto. You know, but, you know, coming up soon on our schedule, I'll let everybody know. We do have a live reaction to Rampage tomorrow night on Friday. Saturday, we'll have the live reaction to Collision. And then next Wednesday, again, we'll have a reaction to Dynamite in Toronto. Tuesdays, we do AEZ Canada, so make sure you guys join us for that on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Thursdays, we're here again next week covering WrestleManias 31 through 35. And then Friday, we will have Rampage reaction. And Saturday, we will have Collision. But I've been given permission by Connor to make this announcement on air tonight. We do have another interview set up on March 23rd at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. Former WWE superstar Eugene will be joining us on Saturday.
Mr. Wrestling.
The 23rd of March. So make sure you guys join us for that. We do still have our interview up with Kevin Von Erich, probably one of my most favorite interviews so far I've done on this channel. Make sure you guys go check that out. I know everybody's been sharing theirs, their videos with everybody. The interviews are still going to come. Again, we do apologize. Some situations happened with Juventud yesterday, but he did say he wants to make it up to us, so he will try to get back on with us soon. There was miscommunication. It's okay. It happens. Things like that happen. But he does want to come back on the show. With that said, are there any last things you guys want to bring up?
Yep. Just follow us everywhere. Check out these interviews we're doing, man.
I'll bring up my screensaver for my phone.
Hey, look, it's the jobber of the week.
He's looking up like, when does my contract expire?
Yeah, that's him looking up after he got choked out in 2 minutes last night.
Yeah, and again, I'm wondering too when the contract's up. I'm looking for Starks. So if anybody knows where Ricky Starks is, I mean, I've actually missed him. Again, I get to see.
Well, I'll tell you
every day. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
We don't know what his contract situation is. But if his contract has expired, and as tight as he is with Cody Rhodes, I would say look for him to make his appearance at Stand and Deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe.
Remind me when Stand and Deliver is.
It's during the day, Saturday, night one of WrestleMania. It's during the day.
It's the day. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll be at a baby shower, but out of state. But
download Peacock to your phone. You'll be all right.
Yeah. Oh no, I have it.
Yeah. So so we've only got 2 more weeks of covering the WrestleManias, and then WrestleMania 40 will be happening in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, home of ECW. So with that said, we thank everybody for joining us tonight. And as always, like Jason said, be sure to follow us, like us. We're everywhere on YouTube. Love us. We're on.
You don't have to like us, but follow us anyway.
Yeah. You don't have to like us. It's fine. But with that being said, thank you all again. And as always, good night to you guys.
Good night, everybody.
Night.